You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.
The class of 2020 deserves a proper send-off, which is why iHeartRadio and Doritos brings you Commencement the Podcast, featuring speeches and dedications from icons we admire most. Hear from John Legend, Kesha, and many, many more. Check out Commencement the Podcast, out now on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get podcasts, with a special Doritos valedictorian episode where Doritos takes graduation speeches to another level by naming 5 valedictorians, giving them each $50,000 in tuition, and sharing their speeches with the world.
Jarvis Masters has steadfastly maintained his innocence since he was sentenced to death almost 30 years ago.
There are innocent people on death row.
Newly uncovered evidence bolsters those claims of innocence.
I really believe if they found that weapon, I would not have been charged for murder.
You be the judge on Dear Governor, the podcast.
No one knows what a day feels like innocent on death row.
Listen to Dear Governor on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. This is Dr. Roddy Raban. I'm super excited about this upcoming episode. I'm here with my dear friend Melinda, the beauty broker from New York City. You definitely want to tune in because she's going to tell us about how she became the consultant. And you got to learn about beauty brokering. So make sure to tune in and see what we're talking about today. Welcome back to another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. Dr. Roddy Raban, and today I'm super excited. I have a dear friend of mine, Melinda, the beauty broker from New York City. She's also known as an aesthetic consultant, right? As well as a patient safety advocate. So I thought this was a really interesting, first of all, we're really honored to have you. Because I know you came from New York City.
Thank you so much.
And I think this is an interesting topic, and you and I are going to do a whole bunch of topics together, and we're going to do a series of episodes, because I think patients are one side, doctors are another side, and then there's this whole middle ground, and there's sort of in this environment where people are guiding, referring, consulting patients as to where to go, what to do, and there's a lot of controversy around that in terms of ethics and Stark laws and all these buzzwords. So we're going to get into all that, but I want to kind of delve in a little bit for our listeners and talk about what the hell is a beauty broker and how you became that person and all that. So. What is a beauty broker? How does one become a beauty broker? Tell me a little about it.
Right. I guess there's a little bit of controversy around that term, beauty broker. Everyone thinks that there's some type of exchange of money. I got that title from a producer, a TV producer. So originally, beauty broker was supposed to be a TV show. Okay. I thought it was catchy. I was like, I'm going to use this little title because it sounds cute. And then lo and behold, everyone's like, oh, wait, wait a second. You're a broker, so you're getting money, or you're brokering patients to doctors. And that's just not the case. So a little bit of my background is I started off and my foundation is rooted in dentistry, cosmetic dentistry. I went to NYU. I really wanted to be a cosmetic dentist, and I took the hygiene program first. So I first became a dental hygienist, and through working with some of the best cosmetic dentists in the industry, we started at Larry Rosenthal's office in New York City. Larry was in a circle of aesthetic geniuses, worked very closely with Dan Baker, Sherelle Aston, Dave Hidalgo.
Yeah, these are some of the guys that are like
that paved the way,
old school guys that
in our industry.
Right.
Yeah, I really became enamored with aesthetics on a whole, and the full scope of aesthetics, not just the teeth, but the face. And every single day, people would come in and they would sit in the chair, and I would look at their faces, and they all had some work done. And we would always get into this plastic surgery conversation. And they would talk about, the same names would come up, or I would look at their health histories, and the same names would appear on, previous surgeries or previous procedures that they have done. And you could kind of decipher, the different aesthetic or the artistry behind the doctor who had worked on them. And I was just so intrigued by this. So one day, I kind of looked at Mike and Larry, and I was just like, I just don't know if I really want to do this anymore. I think I want to.
You're over dentistry.
I was over dentistry. It's just like, it's like that Forrest Gump moment where he's running and running and running. And then one day he just stops and he's like, I don't want to run anymore. Same thing for me. I was kind of over dentistry. So, the good thing about working with Larry, because he was such a respected name in the industry, was that it opened up a lot of doors for me with very highly esteemed surgeons in our industry. So I was able to get into all of the doors of some of like the most difficult doctors' offices to get into because I work with Larry, because I was young enough and they thought it was cute. I was young. It was like they took me under their wing like a daughter. So a lot of these doctors had invited me into their practice and said, hey, you're interested in aesthetics. And I really, really was. I was just, dying and wanted all of that information and as much knowledge as I could absorb. They're like, come in and observe some surgeries or come and sit with us. Or I would just, pop into their office and be like, hey, I'm here. They would sit me down in their free time and they'd kind of pull out textbooks. And
that's really nice because residents don't even get that these days, to have somebody mentor them and teach them about aesthetics. And, people think now they're all aesthetic gurus because they look on Instagram and they, flip through a few magazines. But when you're learning your aesthetics, if you will, from world-renowned surgeons, it's different. It's more of an academic environment.
It is different. And they also knew here's a girl who wants to educate people. She wants to be a consultant and she's not looking to be a doctor, but in order for her to go out there and educate patients, consumers, anyone who is taking advice from her, it's got to be the right advice. So, we have to really make sure that we're teaching her the right way. So it was important to me to start with surgeons who cared and had integrity and did things the right way and did things by the books. And that was kind of what shaped me as a consultant. And through them, other names would pop up: Gary Burgett, Fred Mennick, Dean Toriumi. And these are other people.
So for the listener, I think that's important, I'm going to help highlight a little bit. It's not like you say I'm a consultant or a patient advocate and there's some training school to go through it. I would say the overwhelming majority of people who say they can do that are just basically connectors. They're people that connect a doctor to a patient. But, it sounds like from your description that people that you interacted with, as a physician who was in the aesthetic world, and I trained for, 20 years, all these people are giants in the industry. And to have conversations with them and sit down with them and pick their brains is a huge, huge opportunity that a lot of people don't get. So your foundation is not going to be just like, oh, I just whimsically decided I like plastic surgery, and so now I want to give people some advice.
That's correct. No, I always say, I feel like indirectly I've been doing a 28-year fellowship, basically. As a consultant, I've just had that hands-on experience with some of the greats throughout the world. And that was always really important, where I was getting that education from, where I was getting this information from. Are they a credible surgeon? Are they a good source? So I just always wanted to align myself with the best because, hey, I started with the best. Larry was considered one of the best in dentistry. So he really set the standard for me and who I wanted to align myself with as a professional.
Well, I think it all has to do with what you want to seek as a person. I mean, the truth of the matter is you can be trained incredibly well and choose to take the dark road, or you could have terrible training and realize that what you're doing isn't right. It's just the notion of knowing right from wrong. And I think that's something that defines all of us. And so if you want to be a consultant, AKA give people advice and guide them, you know that there's a better way and a worse way of doing it. And so if you want to do it really well, then you want to get information from people that really know what they're talking about. And so that makes that sort of speaks to, it's kind of an integrity driven kind of concept.
So here's my question to you. What are the surgeon's take on working with a consultant? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, before I met you, I don't really think I ever had much of a notion about consultants. I mean, I think the average person thinks as a consultant, as the name had said, a broker. So someone's gonna send you patients. As you know, and I don't know how many people know, it's a very controversial concept because, and as a result, they made a law about it, which is the concern, and this isn't the concern in many other fields, but in medicine, the reality is that you can't refer patients for compensation.
Right.
And that would be a kickback, et cetera. So when I first started, on all these years, I really haven't met any consultants because anyone who's approached me for being a consultant
wanted money
back. So the idea was, hey, Dr. Raban, would you like me to refer you my people? And in exchange, I want X, Y, and Z. And the answer is no, that's illegal. The Stark Law, which means that and I don't know if everybody understands this because they assume like a lot of professions have adopted this, which is like lawyers and other people, that you can't get a referral from someone and then get paid for that referral because that puts the person who's being referred in a very precarious area because then their best interest isn't being held. So the answer to your question is historically no. But having met you and interacted with you, if you in general meeting people, we had said as we'll say in other episodes, that are having a hard time managing through this process. Some people can muddle through all of the information and find their way to the end. They can read between the lines and know how to read reviews and really look at photos and be able to know the training and figure their way out. Awesome. Some people can't. They need a little guidance. And I think for those people who need guidance so they don't end up in the wrong office, having an individual who's unbiased and who's going to truly give them good advice, I think that's a great idea and serves them well. And so I think having a consultant refer to me is great. I mean, if she's already vetted the patients, and by the way, it could be a he, but whomever it is, if that person's already vetted them and says, hey, I have this patient who's interested in, for example, doing a rhinoplasty. That's awesome. Why not?
Right. Some doctors are opposed to it. I think a lot of doctors just draw assumptions from the position that I'm in. Oh, she's referring. She must be getting something in return. So, as a businesswoman also, first and foremost, because I do have an organizational psychology background, in order to have started my company, I put myself through a master's course at my master's at Columbia University. But structuring the business has been interesting for me, and growing this business as a consultant. And every year you learn, right? You make mistakes, you learn from them. You do something, you put something into play, you learn from it. Did it work? Did it not work? So, we've restructured a bunch of times.
Yeah.
We used to have a membership network. It was considered a membership network where, yes, doctors would pay a 1-year membership fee. And I've since done away with that membership. A doctor would pay, we vetted surgeons. These were doctors who I really loved, and we vetted, and we took a lot of time understanding and learning what the doctor's techniques were, or what their philosophies were, and what their true niches were. So for me, it wasn't like, you paid me because you just paid me money, so I'm going to work with you. Or I didn't just go to any doctor and say, hey, you want my referrals? Pay me this per year. It was really doctors who I felt passionately about, because I truly do care about the patient. Yeah, no, I care about the result.
I've noticed that, as we've discussed, I think the people that you've selected, or at least you work with currently, and not obviously that's constantly in flux, tend to be well-trained people. And I think from what you described to me that, you basically now just consult patients, and there's no, basically the people sit down with you and you give them your expertise, and they pay for your knowledge, much like they would pay for a lawyer, they'd pay for an accountant, they'd pay for a periodontist. Right. They sit down and they gain your expertise. And I think that model obviously eliminates any concern from anybody regarding any kind of bias, so to speak.
That's right. It's a consultancy, so I am paid a consulting fee from the client now. And we're busy enough. We see 15 to 20 clients a day, and it keeps us busy, and we're hiring new consultants, and we're constantly looking for other experts to bring on board, because obviously I can't be in all places at once. So now we're vetting new consultants. But yes, every year as a business is restructure, and that's basic business 101 and business management 101. The business constantly has to evolve. So yes, we've evolved with the years, and I'm really proud of what I've built in the past 20 years and how it's grown exponentially in the past 20 years. And now in this day and age, and the whole internet, Instagram, social media culture, that when people are confused, they have an expert that they could come to help navigate this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the interesting part. I mean, I think what happened is, interestingly enough, businesses grow out of other entities. So I think social media is maybe perhaps your best, the best thing that ever happened for you. And I don't mean that in ever wish bad for anyone, but because it's created so much confusion, and there's so much misrepresentation, and there's so much smoke and mirrors, I think the reality is that even really savvy people don't know how to navigate it. And you go to a doctor, but you need someone to help you sort of decipher the code or translate this information. And so to have individuals who make it their profession, who know doctors, vet them, know what their experience is like, know that if they've sent patients to them and they didn't do as they did, they no longer, that's a value. So I think that's a really interesting profession to have available to people. So when patients come to you, they'll say, hey, Melinda, I'm interested in having, a facelift. And so what's the consultation process like? What are you doing for these people? What do you guys do?
So First, we talk about whether or not they are a good candidate, or we talk about all of their options and what are the benefits or, the pitfalls to those different procedures and options, and why, or, why should they or why shouldn't they do this procedure. Obviously, the ultimate advice and guidance is going to come from the doctor, but at least I could kind of guide them down that path to the right physician, to the right specialist for their case specification. So we just talk about their unique case specifications, what's presenting when they come and sit across from me, what they're interested in, and if it applies to their case. And obviously, through gaining a lot of knowledge through all of my specialists, what are the pros and cons to those procedures? We talk about the fees, talk about the downtime, we talk about the healing and that whole process and how to prep the body for surgery. We have now a nutritionist on board. I work with a world-renowned biochemist and nutritionist, Paula Simpson, who's incredible. She's a part of my staff. She's a part of my team. So it is an integral part on our play, like how we conduct the consultation and how we approach the patient and really listen to the patient. And so it's a lot of record taken, and as far as what do they want? What is their ideal aesthetic outcome? What are they looking for? And we listen for really key words. And in the first 5 minutes, you always get that truth in the first 5 minutes of talking to someone, what is most important to them, what bothers them the most. And, what it provides for us is a lot of that communication and full circle communication that we also have with our surgeons or whatever the surgeon they decide to choose. We'll give them a few options. We'll talk about the doctor. We'll talk about their background. We'll talk about their techniques. We'll talk about why we like them or why we've chosen them to be in our network. Yeah. And,
so then, what about if someone is listening, particularly doctors, and they'll be like, well, you're playing the role of a doctor. That's not for you to do. What medical training do you have that you're sitting there telling a patient what they need or what they don't need? What is your thoughts on that?
We never tell anyone what they need. We tell everyone what could possibly be the right option for them. So, or something that might not be the right option for them based on what we've seen. So, just again, trial and error over time, what we've seen with our scope of being a consultant and seeing, good and bad, the good, the bad, the ugly, people who come to us for revisions, things that they've done, procedures that they have done. And again, feedback from my doctors who are like, hey, Melinda, you know what? A lot of people are doing, 5-6 rounds of old therapy. We're going in and doing a facelift. There's a lot of scar tissue. So maybe when you talk to the patient, talk to them about that. If they're deciding to do something like lifting their face or tightening their skin, that might be something they want to stay away from. So we're in constant communication with our surgeons to be able to provide that feedback for our clients.
So I think the thing that why I bring that question up is because obviously there's always going to be a little bit of controversy, right? Is it necessary? It's not. I think it goes back to how things are done.
Right. I'm not carrying out the procedures.
Right.
We're just giving advice. They can listen. They can take it or leave it.
Right. But the point is not just that you're giving advice, but there's advice that's based on heartfelt, long-term education and communication versus advice that's just like whimsical and just because, I think I know. So much, I think that in the instance where you have all this experience with all these really great doctors, you've spent many years learning the industry. You and I have spoken on many occasions. I've always been impressed that in terms of the things that I feel, and I'm pretty transparent. Oh, that's a stupid procedure. Wow, that's awful. Why the F would you do that? I mean, it's pretty obvious that I'm opinionated about the things. I found that we're similar in regards to that, which is a nice and refreshing idea because often people that are in the consulting world tend not to give a shit about, well, for example, oh, you shouldn't be doing that because it's not really good because it doesn't serve them. It serves the patient. And the idea is that many of them don't want to serve the patient. So I think it's really important to differentiate, much like doctors, there's various types of people who are consulting, and you want to be the type of consultant that is really, truly trying to take in all the information and sort of be the liaison or the switchboard from doctors and patients.
Right. I try to work with, brilliant surgeons who are educated, who are the key opinion leaders in our industry, who sit on the expert panels.
What the hell are you doing here?
I mean,
Oh
right?
my
Get on
God.
some panels,
You've,
right?
you've obviously gone off track. The airplane landed in the wrong airport. We're gonna have to take a break on that one. We're gonna take a break. We'll be back here. We'll talk with Melinda a little bit more and find out about this consultant's process. Thank you for tuning in to Plastic Surgery Uncensored.
You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.
iHeartRadio and the U.S. Census Bureau wanted to do something special for the class of 2020. So we made Commencement, a new podcast with words of inspiration from the biggest names like John Legend.
I believe that during uncertain and trying times, we must lean on love to show us our clearest path forward.
Mary J. Blige, Tim Cook, David Chang, Katie Couric.
You'll need some very important life skills to move forward. Perhaps the most important one is resilience.
Chelsea Handler, and Kesha.
Congratulations! You did it. You graduated. This is a time for celebration of an amazing personal achievement.
Listen to iHeartRadio's new podcast, Commencement, in partnership with the 2020 Census. Speeches available now on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, you can do something that'll affect the next 10 years. So if you lived in a dorm, don't worry, your school will count you. If you didn't, visit 2020census.gov/grad to be counted.
iHeartRadio and T-Mobile know that the 2020 graduation will be unlike any other in history. So, to celebrate all of the graduates, we've created a new podcast called Commencement, featuring inspiring speeches from the biggest names in music, entertainment, philanthropy, and more, all taking the time to show you, the class of 2020, that you matter.
I go by the name of DJ Khaled. You have been chosen. You made it. The world changed in 2020, but you're gonna change it forever. And all of y'all are superstars.
You are the future.
Class of 2020, another one. We the best.
It's a proper send-off that you, the class of 2020, deserves. Listen to iHeartRadio's Commencement podcast now. Then head to TikTok and check out DJ Khaled as he kicked off T-Mobile's Toss Your Cap Challenge. For every video, T-Mobile will donate $5 to the nonprofit Jobs for America's Graduates, up to $200,000. Head to TikTok now and join T-Mobile's Toss Your Cap Challenge.
Welcome back to Plastic Surgery Uncensored. I'm here with Melinda, our beautiful beauty broker from New York City, and we're delving into the sore idea of aesthetic consultant. What does that mean, and is that beneficial or not, and who is it benefiting? And I think what we were talking about a little bit at the break was this idea, much like everything else, things can be done well and with integrity and not. And I think that this aesthetic consulting is one of those areas where if somebody like, oh, I love cosmetics and I had my rhinoplasty done, and so therefore now as you said, I'm an expert.
Right.
What background do you have? What credentials do you have? Who says you know better? And do you have access to a massive network? If you're a consultant and you work with 5 surgeons and only 5 surgeons, I think you're doing the patient a disservice.
Right.
But how many doctors are in your network that you
close to about like 530 surgeons worldwide.
Okay. So 530 surgeons worldwide would tell you immediately that there's no bias, which means what? Which means I refer to whomever I think is going to be best for the patient based on what they need, where they are, who they are, what they can afford.
That's right.
Right? So it's important to talk about these things because you don't just run out and be like, oh, I don't know how to get through this process, and so says she's a consultant, but based on what? So I think that's really, really important to reiterate.
Yeah. No, we always try to zone in on the patient's situation. And just, again, with all of the experience that I've had and how many years I have been in the industry, you see certain surgeons really excel at specific types of cases.
I mean, listen, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do for the patients is say, hey, listen, I know this group of great physicians. I know them to be safe. I know them to be credible. I know them to have good results. I know them to be honest. I know that I have sent patients to them in the past who have been happy. And maybe you might want to consider them.
Right.
So I think that's a very useful thing, because at the end of the day, what are the patients going to do? They're going to go online.
They're going to research.
They're going to do research. They're going to read a bunch of fake reviews, and then they're going to ask their friends who don't know shit, and they're going to go to their friend's doctor. Historically, that's generally what happens.
It is. And we try to be very evidence-based, results-driven professionals. So we always are, best compliment for me as a consultant is my surgeon doing the best job for my client. So there's nothing more gratifying than when a patient comes back to me and they're like, God, Melinda, you were so on point with that referral. Got the best job from that doctor. He's awesome. I would have never found him if it weren't for you. And that's often the case. I have a lot of that, and I hear a lot of that. And I'm just like, I'm really, I'm offering a good service, and I feel like these patients are really benefiting from it, and they're learning something that they didn't know before. We do tons of deep research, and, again, it's just endless spending time.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's really important. So how are you vetting these doctors? So when you say you do research, obviously you're here, so you don't do that much research. But what is it that obviously you're doing the same research that the patients are doing, but you're looking at it with a little more sort of a different eye, in a different perspective. So what are the things that you look for some of these doctors that you're like, wow, these guys are outstanding? What specifics?
Yeah.
But
I spend a lot of time looking through the textbooks. I have a couple of mentors. We have an advisory board. So a lot of the doctors on my advisory board are like, check this one out. Look into this surgeon, look into that surgeon, because I think you would find this guy interesting.
So you have an advisory board. So I'm going to constantly be sort of highlighting things just so you understand, because I don't want people running out tomorrow and just going to any consultant, because a lot of these consultants are just somebody who had a procedure done and loves cosmetics. But this is like you guys have a legit business model that is there to give people some great advice, and to have mentors and other surgeons that are involved in you sending patients to other surgeons just tells you that, that it isn't like there's these three guys and they're monopolizing all these patients.
Absolutely not. No, we have about 10 surgeons on our advisory board, and they're kind of like the old school guys, who attend all of the meetings, who read every single article and every single journal, who know the textbooks inside and out, who still school me, and I'll sit with them, and they're like, here, look at this, chapter 20, Melinda, look at that paragraph right here. And they'll bring things up to me, and I'm constantly learning, and there's so many things to know in this industry, and I definitely don't know everything. But if I am ever stumped on anything, I turn to these mentors, I turn to these advisors.
No shortage of great doctors that you can
Absolutely. And I respect these guys. They're not on social media. They're not on podcasts. They're not doing any of these, new age marketing techniques or, shows or social media. They're not
suggesting that this podcast is... I'm very insulted.
I'm here. Listen, I'm here. I'm a young consultant, so I'm here. We have to keep up with the Joneses. But again, these are guys who have put their time in.
You have a legit bunch of people that are serving as your guidance. And I think the last thing that's really important is not only that, but you're able to tell patients the things they need to be careful of different physicians. For example, you just said to me about, like, if a physician, for example, pushes a certain procedure, that physician may have interest in that company or has benefit to be had. So what happens is that you, by doing your homework on their behalf, can tell them about the bias or the disclosures that they need to know. And that's
right. A lot of people come to me and they're like, well, I could just go on Real Self. Or a lot of people said, well, I found that doctor on Real Self and I ended up severely botched. So there are review sites, too, that have changed, and they changed their business models significantly over the years. And now, whose best interests do they have at heart? And that's a really good question, because a lot of these review sites, it's a pay to play.
Yeah, so that is the case. I think that places like Real Self and Yelp are semi-useful but very tricky. And the reality is that, they monetize. They started out as great platforms for patients to go and learn. And then when they realize that they have, X million subscribers and people that are tuning in, they monetize it. And what they do is they tell physicians that if you pay me, we'll make your page or profile pop in front of somebody else, which is a very manipulative game. So in general, I definitely think that having consultants that are honest and integrity-driven and well-educated is definitely a bonus in the industry, especially given the landscape that we currently live in.
Absolutely. And, again, informed consumers are wise consumers, and they're going to get the product or, the end result that they want. And as a consultant, I am driven by the result. I'm not driven by the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, and I definitely think it's something definitely for someone, for certain types of patients to look into. Well, we're very happy that you joined us here. I'm excited for the series of episodes that you and I are going to do together. I think they're going to be really interesting. So definitely want to tune in as Melinda and I go over some really interesting topics together. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Roddy.
That's another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. Make sure to follow us and subscribe, and most importantly, download, and don't forget to tell your grandma. All right, guys.
We would love to get your feedback. If you enjoyed and found our podcast helpful, tell us why. Give us a review and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or you can go directly to revolverpodcast.com. If you have a topic you would like us to talk about, then please reach out to us on Facebook, Roddy Raban, Instagram at Dr. Roddy Raban, or RoddyRaban.com. You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.
Renowned Buddhist author and teacher Jarvis Masters has steadfastly maintained his innocence since he was sentenced to death almost 30 years ago. On a new podcast, Dear Governor, Jarvis poses the question:
how many guilty men have to be put to death to justify the execution of one innocent man?
From the confines of his 9x4 cell in San Quentin, Jarvis will share his riveting life story, how he has managed to maintain a sense of optimism in the most dire circumstances.
I'm supposed to have lost my damn mind by now. But I think I'm a survivor.
And how he'll provide the details of the bloody murder and trial that landed him on death row.
I really believe if they found that weapon, I would not have been charged for murder.
Hear details from inside the courtroom as his attorneys fight for his final state appeal. With newly disclosed evidence that bolsters his claims of innocence, will the California Supreme Court exonerate him or reaffirm his death sentence? Listen to Dear Governor on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Class of 2020, we know things have been super weird lately. You were robbed of a graduation ceremony, so we found some people to write you commencement speeches. John Legend, he's in. Hillary Clinton, she's in too. Over 20 of your favorites, from DJ Khaled to Coach K, Abby Wambach to Halsey. They're all here to give you the wisdom that we could all use right now. Tune in to iHeartRadio's new podcast, Commencement. Speeches are out now on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.